Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. This is the third installment of a series of videos I had from a longer conversation with WildUte breaking down where we think the ACC schools will go if and when the conference does fall apart. And so if you like conference realignment, we ask that you please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, but also go down to the video description to get the links to WildUte and all of his content. Be sure to go check that out. Now, let's get to our conversation.
Pitt Panthers.
Pitt.
Yes. Pitt fans are awesome. They are so arrogant online, all the interactions. They always seem to want to fight back on the idea of going to the Big 12, especially. They think it's beneath them. Okay. Whatever. I don't honestly, the Big 12 doesn't care what you think, Pitt fan. If you add value to the conference and you need a landing spot, it's irrelevant. Like what your thoughts are, you're going to go. You're going to go. At the end of the day, Pitt is going to end up in the Big 12 conference. There's a 0% shot they get in the Big 10. There's a 0% shot they get in the SEC. So it's going to be the rebuilt ACC or the Big 12 for these guys. And I'll give it an 80-20 shot at the Big 12 over the ACC. So the ACC would have 20. And the Big 12 would have 80%. So we're talking about 80% likely they end up in the Big 12 and they're going to scratch, claw, scream, and everything else that Pitt does. That's fine. Don't care. But when we pair you with West Virginia for the backyard brawl, that's like basically adding two teams in one because you have a rivalry with West Virginia. And Pitt fans, listen to this. If West Virginia wasn't in conference, the Big 12 wouldn't pursue you. It's just a fact. Like that's the reason that you're being pursued is because of the backyard brawl game. But you've got that, so we're going to go after you, and you're going to add value to the Big 12. So welcome to the Big 12.
If you are a Pitt fan watching this and you take umbrage with anything that WildUte just said, please let us know in the comments. Lay into them respectfully, but please let us know what you think about this. I have to say I am pretty well with you. And the backyard brawl in conference would be fantastic. I'm for
sure.
I'm not for a lot of this realignment. I don't love that Texas and OU are going to the SEC, even though I guess BYU is a beneficiary of it. But it is, a lot of these changes are actually reuniting some rivalries. You actually are reuniting Texas and A&M together. And so wherever we can reunite some of these major rivalries, I'm totally with you. I thought rebuilt ACC was a little bit higher, but we're essentially the same. I'm with you on this, 65. And then I thought there's another chance that I don't really know. I feel like there's other scenarios where maybe they end up somewhere else. It gets weird because those big two aren't taking them. So that's when they're kind of in that realm where anything could happen, but I'm with you. So
okay,
Louisville, they're similar
Louisville.
This is another one that, brings kind of past rivalries, brings, a basketball brand, maybe not the biggest brand, but, and I wouldn't say they're quite blue blood, but they are right. Maybe that tier just after blue bloods in terms of basketball. They had their time with football, but not traditionally a powerhouse necessarily, not necessarily a huge state, but still fit for the Big 12 in a lot of ways. Do they have a chance of going anywhere else?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Do they have a chance? And the answer is no to the Power 2, 0 for the Big 10 and 0 for the SEC. Don't see that happening. They just don't have a big enough brand to warrant that. So is it going to be the rebuilt ACC or the Big 12? Hey, Louisville fans are receptive about going to the Big 12. The Big 12 should have added them years ago. They've got a rivalry with Cincy. I'm saying this is a 85% likelihood the Big 12 snags Louisville and a 15% likelihood they stay in a rebuilt ACC. Virginia Tech might be like the number one target, but maybe perhaps the first team that's going to jump is going to be Louisville to the Big 12.
I am with you. And actually here, I'm just going to, I put them basically the same as Pitt. I view their situations pretty much the same. They almost did go to the Big 12, but then they got the invite to the ACC over West Virginia, and they said, we're just going to stay on the East Coast. So,
and West Virginia was sour about that, but guess what? Who's going to end up ahead at the end of the day? Mountaineers.
Yeah, they may end up in the same place in West Virginia. Now they're joining West Virginia's conference. So, while when when BYU got added initially to the Big 12 and the other schools were all more east, I was not thrilled by that. But, West Virginia has been the outcast, been the outlier for a long time. And now that we've added a lot more schools out west for BYU, I feel good for West Virginia, and also makes it great for me being East Coaster. I mean, add UVA, add Tech, all these guys. That makes it a lot closer for me, a lot, to travel to these games. I went to West Virginia this last year, and that was a bit much to do all in one day. So I say bring them on, but I think it just makes sense in a lot of ways. I do think these guys are. I could see a scenario where Pitt, Louisville, some of these guys, like you said, maybe they see Big 12 as beneath them, or maybe they see a chance to rebuild the ACC. I just can't see how they'd get more value out of a rebuilt ACC losing some of its top brands than going to the Big 12.
I mean, the ACC in its current iteration is making essentially the same as the Big 12 in its current iteration.
Mm-hmm.
You subtract out Florida State from that, that's a huge chunk of the value, and you move Clemson, UNC, and you're talking about, I'm serious here, you're talking about maybe in a renegotiated television contract warranting about $15 to $18 million in annual distributions. Like, it's not even a really hard decision anymore. You have to do it financially once that break happens, and if you've got the option to do it. And I think at the end of the day, Pitt, Louisville, and Virginia Tech will make that move.
Yeah.
And then not talking about Syracuse here. So Syracuse.
This is another good one because they don't get talked a lot about for of the Big 12. But when we look at expansion, what does Brett Yormark want? He loves flirting with the idea of getting back to New York. We're talking Syracuse is definitely a basketball school. New York, obviously, huge market. Not that you necessarily get all of New York, but just getting your foot in up there. Another East Coast team. What are the arguments against it?
Arguments against adding Syracuse is the football is below average. The recruiting's below average. The brand's more of an average size brand. While you get the New York market, which is massive, and you've got good basketball, is that enough? Like, would you rather add UConn or Syracuse or Duke? It's basically the same thing. And I would argue that Duke's probably more valuable because of the brand recognition. So throwing percentages on Syracuse, I'm saying 0 to the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. Rutgers already occupies New York. SEC, it's too far away geographically. They're not going to go up to New York. Rebuilt ACC is very likely. I'm going to say that there is a 95% shot that they stay in a rebuilt ACC. And then there's just a micro chance where maybe Yormark swings in the 5% chance that they end up in the Big 12. But I really think that they're going to be a casualty of staying in whatever iteration of the ACC exists afterwards.
Yeah. Man, you're harder on Syracuse than I am. I'm probably too soft. I'd said I don't really. This is probably below 1. I just put 1 so it would register here. Percent chance of the Big 12. They're actually losing their AAU accreditation, from what I understand. So maybe it's even less.
Syracuse is?
Yeah, I think I saw that. But, they got passed over for Rutgers once. I don't see the chance, but I don't know. They made more sense to me as a Big 10 school back in the day than Rutgers did, but so I was wrong then. So it probably is closer to 0, but I put 1 there. SEC, not a chance. And then let me see here. I thought 40% chance. I gave them a little bit of a higher percent chance, kind of based on all these other scenarios. If some of these other schools end up, in the SEC or something like that, NC State and Virginia Tech somehow ended up in the SEC, then I could see a chance where, I think their chance increases for getting to the Big 12. And then what am I at here? So I guess a 39% chance. Was that right? Yeah. Don't do math live. So yeah, I don't know. I gave them maybe a little bit more odds there. And then who knows what's going to happen if enough of the schools leave the ACC and you're with so few. I just think there's more of a chance of, at that point, it might be easier for them to just go join like the American than try to rebuild the ACC on the fly.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech is another one that, checks so many boxes, but just doesn't quite get you there. They got the academics. They've got the market. They've had good basketball, but yeah, not necessarily a traditional powerhouse there. But unfortunately, and so in some ways they make sense for the Big Ten because the academics and helping expand footprint. SEC, they just share the footprint with them. But there could be a way you could talk me into, the Big Ten, maybe or Big 12, maybe they end up there. I don't know. What's your read on it?
Yeah, so I think the Big Ten, I'll give it a 15% shot that Georgia Tech gets into the Big Ten. I think because they bring Atlanta, they are going to be a prospect. They bring elite academics. They've got football history. They've got good recruiting, but just not a lot of recent football success and brand value. Just not really your Big Ten caliber. So it's unlikely, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. The Big Ten is outside the realm of possibility for the SEC. It's a zero because the SEC already owns that market. And what upside would Georgia Tech bring to the SEC when you've got the Bulldogs in state? Zero.
Yeah.
So really, you're looking at the highest likelihoods being a rebuilt ACC and a Big 12. And that's a tricky one here because so we put a zero for the SEC. I think for an other, you can put a zero here. I'm saying here for the SEC, there's a 50% likelihood that Georgia Tech stays in whatever iteration of the ACC exists after all this thing shakes out. So that means the remaining balance, they're 35%, which I would say Big 12. The Big 12, they're going to be interested in Georgia Tech, but I think Georgia Tech's going to be in like a fifth position as far as realignment candidates if things break apart in the ACC and they can take their grasp of a Virginia Tech, a Louisville, an NC State, and a Pitt. I think Georgia Tech's in fifth position, so I think that they're kind of in trouble. So I would say 35% here to round it out. It could happen with the Big 12, but I think most likely they end up in the ACC.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought I put 1% here, again, meaning less than 1%. I guess there's a world where they could end up there. I think that's pretty slim. I don't think that the SEC needs Georgia Tech by any means. I mean, they're just completely overshadowed in the Georgia market. Agree. I think there's a good chance they stay with the ACC. They're going to be there with some of these other guys that didn't just quite make the cut. I think there's similar to Syracuse that they end up in the Big 12 and then just wherever else, things take them. They could be anywhere. So I'm with you more or less. Our numbers look a little different, but I think the same logic there with Georgia Tech. And now Wake, this is a sad story.
It's a sad story. And the answer here is 0 for the Big 10, 0 for the SEC, 0 for the Big 12, and 0 for other. In my opinion, it's 100% the rebuild SEC. Wake Forest is going to be a casualty. They're going to go whatever happens to the ACC, they're going to stick in that conference and try to survive it out.
I basically had similar to you. I think the rebuilt ACC or other at this point is essentially the same. Mm-hmm. I did give them, I don't know, maybe I'm just being way too, again, I think it's less than 1%, but I think there's a world where maybe all these guys end up somewhere else and they say, you know what, we still want to get into North Carolina. We whiffed on that. I don't really think it's very realistic at all, but maybe I was just feeling generous because I felt bad for them. But Boston College, kind of the same.
Yeah. You see that line up there for Wake Forest, that 0%, 0%, 100%, 0-0 for the big SEC, rebuilt ACC, Big 12, and other. That's exactly the same scenario. BC is going to end up in that rebuilt ACC. That's where they're already at and everything. It's easy. They're going to take what they're going to be given. And I think the ACC will survive. I don't think it's going to fall apart. I think there is going to be an ACC in the future once the teams bounce. It's just going to be a different look and feel than it currently is.
Yeah, I had it a little different. I guess I was thinking just because the Boston market gave them slightly greater odds of ending up into the Big 12. So, I modified it a little bit over Wake. I think there's that. And they do have a little bit more of a history, with some of their athletics. So I think for that, they have maybe a slighter chance to work their way in, depending on how all the the dominoes fall. Thanks for watching. Please let us know in the comments what you think, where you think that these schools will end up if the ACC falls apart. Also, if you haven't already, please go check out the first 2 videos. We'll have the links here somewhere, and then also keep an eye out for the 4th one when that gets posted. Appreciate it. As always, go Cougs.